Hey, what's good, family? Listen, I'm so glad that you are here. Pastor Laron, listen, again, I'm really glad that you popped by. Thank you for just popping in. Thank you for tuning in. I want to make sure that before we even get down to business, before we get to this lesson that I'm so excited about tonight, I need you to do me a favor. Will you do me a favor? Go ahead and first of all, make sure that you like and subscribe because I don't want you to miss nothing. And secondly, I want you to go ahead and make sure that you send this to somebody. Tonight tonight's series, tonight's session, tonight's lesson, tonight's study, we really begin just to kind of put our boots on the ground when we talk about this brand new series that we're entitled Seasons and Cycles. And I want you to hear me tonight because what we go through, what we experience, is very much tied to the season that we're in. Now, how long we stay in that season is when it then can become a cycle. We are now repeating seasons because we're repeating cycles. So again, listen, I'm glad that you're here. Let's go ahead and let me first give you this. I thought and thought and thought. I prayed and prayed and prayed. And sought and sought and sought about. Listen, what do we title tonight's lesson? What do we title tonight's lesson? Tonight's lesson, real quick, is titled "He's Not Done." He's not done. When we talk about seasons, right? The first thing I want to maybe go ahead and get out the way is that whenever you see a certain season, that is how you'll know you're stepping into a new season. Um, let me say it again because I feel like I said that wrong. If whenever you begin to start seeing certain signs in a season, that is a clear indicator that you're stepping into a new season. So there's certain signs that are beginning to unfold, certain signs that are beginning to occur whenever you're stepping into a new season. And it's not necessarily things that you know to look for. Okay, it's not certain signs that you necessarily know to look for, but there'll be certain signs that you'll begin to see. There'll be certain signs that you'll begin to experience. So you won't always know to look for these signs, but you'll know that there's a shift in your season based on these signs. We we hear folks. You ever hear somebody? We good at this, especially black folks. We say this a lot. Good old church mothers. Whenever we hear folks say, how you, and then you hear a good old church mother respond, I'm walking in my season. I'm walking in my season with this understanding that life now is full of seasons because it is. Genesis actually talks about life being broken up into seasons. The Bible even speaks about it. In fact, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, even in my own theology, and even when we think about the Genesis, the creation story, and how we read the Bible, we read in the Word where it talks about how God created, but God didn't create everything in one day. God created over a span of time. And so in other words, everything wasn't created all at once. Everything was created in days with an understanding of those days also are indicative and represent seasons. God didn't do it all at once. God got created in seasons. There was a rhythm, there was a pace, there was an order, there was an intentionality now with God creating that God didn't put that God didn't put water before in the earth before God formed the earth, right? No, that wasn't the way it happened. There was an order. God created now in seasons. The Bible also speaks about seasons when the Bible talks about what that we will reap, huh? We will reap in due season. We love that scripture. We'll reap in due season. But the Bible talks about these seasons that we're in, these seasons that we will experience throughout life. And these seasons now will all look different. They'll all look different. We're gonna get into seasons and the different types of seasons that there are. But depending on the season that you're in, that season will look different. So there'll be seasons of increase. Yes, There'll be seasons of abundance, but there'll also be seasons of lack. There'll be seasons of victory. There'll also be seasons of wilderness, being in the wilderness, right? And speaking of seasons of wilderness, I want to share with you uh, the four the four types of spiritual seasons. The four types of spiritual seasons. I mentioned this Sunday. I hate that we had a little bit of technical difficulties with the volume a little bit, but I wanna just recap the four types of seasons that I'd even mentioned this past Sunday in our message. But the four seasons: there's the season of wilderness. Okay, this is the season now where you are experiencing what folk call maybe the trial, the tribulation. It's a season where you feel, just a bit perplexed, right? Maybe a bit uncertain, unsure what the next move, what the next step, what the next direction looks like. Wilderness may feel like you out here just wandering, a bit uncertain, a bit unsteady, a bit fearful. But then there's the season of growing, and the growing season is the second type of spiritual season after the wilderness season. It's the growing season. That's the season now where you're feeling, think about it like a baby teething. My son is teething right now. And what that growing season represents in our lives, it feels like teething. There's a stretching, right? There's this enamel trying to break through the gums. There's a stretching, or think of it even like a baby growing, right? There's this stretching. And so whenever we're in the season of growing, it often feels uncomfortable because it's stretching us, it's growing us. It's a growing season. But then the third spiritual season that we experience is the pruning season. It's the pruning season. And the pruning season is the season now where God now is nudging us, pushing us for our purpose and destiny to begin to take form. And God does that now by pruning. And that pruning may look like God pruning us, where God is cutting things from us that no longer serve us in the next season and phase that we're going into. And so pruning is important because we can't enter the next season without God doing some pruning. So sometimes God prunes us, and sometimes God prunes the things around us, and sometimes God has to prune the people that surround us. So the pruning season now again is God having to trim the fat, God having to make sure that in order for the rose to blossom, in order for the rose to bloom, God has got to now trim and prune the thick and the thistle and the weeds, everything now trying to choke the rose, everything trying to prevent the rose from growing. God has to prune. Season number 4 is the harvest season. That's the harvest season. That's the season we all want to love. That's the season we all want to linger in. But that's the season now where you begin to reap everything that you have sown in the previous seasons. In other words, now hear me, based on how you respond in the wilderness season, based on how you respond in the growing season, based on how you show up and respond in the pruning season, determines what the harvest season looks like for you. Is that connecting the dots for anybody? That in order for me to reap a full harvest, I may have to reap a full wilderness. In order for me to reap a full harvest, I may have to reap a full growing season, a stretching season. In order for me to reap a full harvest, come on, somebody, what's next? I may have to reap a full pruning season. And so sometimes many of us, we can get through the wilderness season, right? And that was, we got through. God let us out. We can get to the growing season, right? Where we allow God to grow us, to grow us up, to mature us. That's what happens in the growing season. But then sometimes, hey, maybe we feel like, listen, listen, we done been in this push and pull. That's what it feels like when it's a stretch, right? That now we now enter the pruning season, and because of what we went through in the wilderness season, now that we're in the pruning season, God says, listen, there's some things I gotta cut. We wrestle with getting to reap the full harvest because we don't trust God to do the pruning. We don't trust God to do, God, cut the things that don't serve me well so that I can reap a full harvest. God, if you got to cut some people, you got to cut some habits, you got to cut some personalities, you've got to cut my limited perspective. God, prune whatever you need to prune so that I can reap a full harvest. God, grow in me. God, grow through me. God, birth in me whatever you need to do so that I can reap a full harvest. As I may walk through the valley, because that's what a wilderness is. As I may walk through the valley of the shadow of death, God, do what you need to do because I'll fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. I can reap a full harvest because I know God is with me in the wilderness. And so, God, if you're with me in the wilderness, I know now that you'll bring me through the wilderness season. You'll bring me through the pruning season. You'll bring me through the growing season, so that I can get to my harvest season. We'll get to the harvest, but the real perspective here is, what kind of harvest do you want to have? You will reap that which you have sown. But how are you showing up in seasons before so that you don't just reap a harvest, but you reap a full harvest? And so tonight and throughout this whole series, we're talking about our experience of seasons, our experience of all four spiritual seasons. I don't want you to miss this because here it is. Our experience of all four seasons, our experience of all four spiritual seasons is very similar to all four seasons that we experience, in terms of literal physical seasons. Here's what I mean. When we talk about the four spiritual seasons, wilderness, growing, pruning, harvest, think about it like the real experiences and seasons that we experience now. So think about the four spiritual seasons and how it connects so much spiritually. That is who God is. That God done connected the spiritual seasons up with the physical seasons. So then we also have the four spiritual seasons, but then what? We've got the four physical seasons: spring, summer, winter, fall. Do you notice how all four of those seasons, they represent something different? Do you notice how all four seasons in the earth that we experience represent something different in the earth? So if all four seasons represent something different in the earth, then certainly all four seasons in the spirit represent something different spiritually. Summer, spring, winter, fall, all woven into our life experience. Hear me tonight. God was intentional about creating seasons. The difficult seasons are designed by God to mold us and mature us, making us stronger, making us more dependent on Him. And here it is, also making us more responsible when we get to the season of the harvest. I want to share this with you real quick before we dive in, a little bit deeper with this. There are places in the earth that do not experience all four seasons. You're gonna get this in a minute. You're gonna get it in a minute. There are places in the earth that do not experience all four seasons. Places like where, Pastor? Well, you got Singapore. Singapore happens to be one of the most consistent climates in the world. Um, they experience the same temperature and they experience the same rainfall pattern all throughout the year. They don't experience all four seasons. Or what about Malaysia? Malaysia, located near the equator, right? Malaysia only has two seasons that they experience: hot and humid. That is the pattern that they experience. It's either going to be wet in Malaysia or it's going to be dry. It's not going to be all 4 seasons. Hear me tonight. So, our spiritual seasons as a process is just like our worldly seasons that we experience in the world. And I bring up Singapore and I bring up Malaysia and other places throughout the earth that don't experience all 4 seasons physically, because here it is. There are some of us that won't be able, if we aren't careful, to experience all 4 seasons spiritually. Boom. Don't miss that. Singapore, Malaysia, some other folks, they don't get all 4 seasons. The goal and the objective for us as believers, my God, is to not get stuck in one cycle, in a cycle of a season, that you miss experiencing the blessings of getting through the next season. If you're not getting through the next season, you're not arriving at your harvest. And many times we can't arrive at our harvest because we aren't moving to the next season. We aren't moving to the next season because we stuck in the same cycle. So the role and the goal for us is to not get stuck in a season repeating the same cycle. But the role and the goal for us is to possess the power to embrace every season. The power to embrace every season. Understanding the season that you're in is vital. Not only is understanding the season that you're in vital, but what is as equally important, what is more important, is how you show up in that season. It's one thing to understand the season that you're in, it's another thing to fail to show up for it. And so you'll know you're entering a new season because there'll begin to be a shift. And so if you don't if you don't even see the shift, because many of us don't see the shift, right? If you don't see the shift, you'll certainly feel it. That is how you'll know you're entering into a new season. You will see it, you will sense it, or you will feel it. Maybe even all three, right? Solomon, great and wise king, he echoes these words when he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 that there is a time and a place for everything. Everything there is a season, and for every purpose under heaven. And so many times when we go through a season, we go through a drought, depending on that season. Wilderness season can feel like a drought. Growing season may even feel like a drought. Pruning season, where God is cutting, trimming. And oftentimes when we enter a drought, we tend to think that God is done. Hear me tonight. He's not done. In fact, not only is God not done, God is still speaking, God is still moving, God is still shifting, God is still healing, God is still providing, God is still answering, God is still loving. Somebody put that in the chat right now. He's not done. I know you may feel done, but God ain't done. You may feel all out of options, but God still got some moves. You may be all out of answers, but God still got a solution to your situation. So what we unpacking tonight and what we will discover throughout this series is what a season is and what a season does for the believer. I want to give you this. Seasons are providential. Seasons are providential. Seasons are a direct result of God. Seasons are created by God. Matter of fact, it was Daniel the prophet that said these words in Daniel 2, um, verses 20 to 21, where Daniel said, "Praise to the name of God forever, whose wisdom and power is God's. For it is God that changes the time and seasons. God sets up kings, God also disposes them." This is Daniel, words of the prophet. It is God who owns and changes time and seasons, sets up kings, and it is the same God that disposes of them. Or what about Luke, uh, who wrote um, who wrote in the book of Acts, right? That God is the source of everything that we need. It is also God is the one who resides what is through him that we are able to live and to do and to be who we are. So understand tonight that God ordains the seasons that we're in, right? That God placed us in the world for such a time as this and for such a season as this. And hear me, because I know it's heavy right now, right? I know it's tough right now. It's a lot of uncertain times. It's a lot of people. Many of us are hurting. Many of us are scared. Many of us are uncertain, and many of us are also not happy with God's choice of timing. But I want you to know tonight that God can still move um, in and through our time and season. And the good news about God is that God's timing, it's never an error. God's timing is never by happenstance. God's timing is never by mistake. It's never by chance. And so when God sets a season or a thing in place or in motion, it is so for such a time as this. But where we get stuck is feeling like this season will be the last season that we're in. I need you to know that, listen, the way that seasons change, oh, God is in charge of seasons. God is in charge of time. God is in charge of seasons. And so seasons now are designed for God to move and shift from darker to brighter, right? From dim to brightness, right? For ashes for beauty. That's the natural progression and the rhythm of God operating in the shift. So God is intentional and God does all things well. So be encouraged, right? Um, that what you're feeling, um, you feeling. Be encouraged that what you sense in this season, you sense. Be encouraged that even in what you're going through, understand life is made up of seasons. And so the good news tonight is that the season that we're in, it won't always be like this. My God, the Lord is perfecting things concerning me. And sooner or later, things will turn in our favor. We in this season, but we got to understand that seasons are providential. Listen, we're not finished, we're not through, but we are almost out of time. Listen, I want to just want to encourage you again tonight. Listen, hang on in there. Hang on in there. Did you hear what I said? Hang on in there. He's not done. God's not finished. God's not through. This is just a season. But what if the replay of the season that you're in is because you've been stuck in the same cycle? God changes the seasons, but we've got the power to break the cycle. Listen, we gonna have a real good time this whole series. Listen, I want to pray a blessing over your life. I want to pray a blessing over your family. I want to just declare that you shall live and not die. I want to declare that you shall walk into your season. I want to declare that everything that has felt like a pushback, everything that has felt like a delay, everything that has felt like, listen, things were just falling apart. Listen, it's rough, it's tough, but I declare that it's only a season. Seasons don't last forever. There'll be harvest. There'll be just like there'll be springtime. There'll be fruit just like there'll be winter. And so I want you to be encouraged tonight that God isn't finished, that God is not through. In fact, God is not done. That's not a period, Pooh. That's the exclamation point right there, baby. Do you hear what I'm saying? God's not through. Welcome tonight to our brand new TNL series titled Seasons and Cycles. If this has blessed you tonight, listen, share it with somebody. Send it to somebody that it will bless, that it will speak to, that it will liberate, it will pull them out of what they're in and where they're at. That, listen, get yourself together. You can't die here. You cannot die here. You cannot stay here in this season. Jesus told the disciples, listen, if you go where I'm sending you, and it ain't what it is, you got to shake the dust and you got to walk into the next season. Let God shift your season. Let God empower you to break every cycle, every chain. Listen, I'm going to see you Sunday, 2 p.m., right here, right where you are. May the Lord God bless you, not just good, but real, real good. God loves you. I love you. You just got to love you. Set some stuff on fire.